This morning I wanted to speak about spirituality. I was reading an article about Brad Pitt's sort of U-turn, or more of a public admission that he's not really an atheist. And even when he said he was an atheist, it was more of a way of just being punk rock and, looking cool, which is something obviously what human beings are susceptible to. Whatever's a bit of a fad, you just say, oh yeah, I'm an atheist or whatever, but you don't really believe that nonsense. However, what's interesting is, him saying I cling on to religion, and that, he believes in spirituality. The thing which a human being cannot escape is that we deep down, we are not just made of physical matter. So the Islamic paradigm teaches us that yes, we have a physical body, but we also have a soul. And the physical body is nourished through food, water, spouses, through relationships with people. So you have that type of physical nourishment. But the spiritual nourishment cannot be fulfilled through material things. And this is something which the Quran is explicitly clear about. And we find from narrations of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that richness, true richness, is the richness of the heart. It's not through material things. In fact, other celebrities like Jim Carrey, they've also admitted this, that now that they're in their 50s, they've, in that sort of midlife crisis, post-midlife crisis zone. And, he said, I wish everybody had what I have, so that they know this is not the answer. He's got everything. He's got, from the time that he was in the film Dumb and Dumber to recent times, all of his adult life, he's been a celebrity. He could do everything he wanted, travel the world, he's wealthy and whatnot, but he's realized this is not it. This is not what makes you fulfilled. What truly makes you fulfilled is a connection with God, and that is something inescapable. You cannot escape it by filling your life up with these types of things. And a few years ago, when I was asked to give a talk at a school, sixth form school in outside of London, the head teacher of the school, she described herself as a spiritual atheist. And I was thinking to myself, what on earth is a spiritual atheist? Because for spirituality, you have to believe in something immaterial, not just material things. And the very basis of physicalism, naturalism, atheism is that the world can be reduced to what we can see is eventually, not souls, not objective morals out there or God or anything else. It's just all, it's all about the physical. It's all about the empirical. It's all about the testable. So with spirituality, what we need to do is we need to recognize this whole idea of atheist spirituality, which people like Sam Harris try and point to. This is nonsense. It's not going to work. It's basically using the label of spirituality, which attracts people, to give them a product which is not the right product. It's like someone's really thirsty and you give them a picture of a glass of water and you say, here you go. They may initially be like, wow, I recognize that. That's water, I'm thirsty. But it's not really going to fulfill you because it's not the real thing. In Islam, however, deep down, true contentment can be found only with God. And in today's world of social media, we have a huge problem that human beings naturally, even in the past, we became depressed. We became sad when we saw people have things that we don't have. People are traveling the world. People are happily married when we may be single. People are rich while we may be poor. People are healthy while we may be sick. And, this is why people have depression. They have a blueprint of the world, that they want the world to be that way. And they have the reality, and the reality is always worse. The reality is always much more difficult. We get sick, we die, we go through pain and suffering and all these types of things. And what does atheism really give us? At best, all of those emotions that you feel, pain, pleasure, lust, love, all of these things are just chemical reactions. You know, if you see something in the world that you think is really horrible or really good, well, that's just particles. That's all it is. There is no ultimate meaning to anything. There is no ultimate value to anything. And most importantly, there is no ultimate hope. When you die, you die. Arthur Schopenhauer, he wrote about this. And he gave the analogy that we are just sheep who are deluded into thinking, we're living this life or whatever. But we will be caught. There will be the butcher who will come along, and one day it will be our turn. And before it's our turn, we may fall prey to sickness, illness, and all these types of things. So I respect that type of atheism. I respect that atheism which says, do you know what? It is all nihilistic. It is all meaningless. It is all, there is no ultimate thing. What I don't like is this hypocritical type of intellectual squatting, that religion has this house of spirituality, and then atheists come along and say, no, we want to squat in this house. You can't really squat in the house if you don't believe in God, because the belief in God is actually the anchor for spirituality. You can't base spirituality on really vague notions like, oh, we want to connect with people, we want to feel great, we want to, we want to focus on humanity, and it's just vagueness. But that vagueness, when you just ask a few more questions, you find out it's basically nothing. So when you ask somebody, okay, it's about human connection. Okay, what does human connection mean? What is human connection? In fact, from a Darwinian point of view, why would you need human connection? This idea of universal love, it's all about, just love and care for each other. Well, actually, that's not really Darwinism. Darwinism is not about, let's all love each other. It's actually capitalistic. It's actually very much about competition and survival. And, the powerful thing about the Quran is that although humanity to a large extent today, we're all about competition. We're all about, I got to be better than this person. I got to do this. I got to do that. Complete, this capitalistic idea. And even Darwinism fits into that, and the selfish gene fits into that as well. In fact, in the Quran, it describes that kind of thinking where people are just competing with each other continuously in wealth, in children, in status, and all these things. And God condemns that. God says, look, that's not what I want. That's not why I created you. And even if you look at the early stories in the Quran, you find that fundamentally the nations that the prophets went to, those nations were very materialistic, and they used to be vain, and they used to build monuments on high places and do these types of actions which the prophets were telling them, this is not the right thing. These things are vain. Like it says in the Quran, do you build fortresses so that you may live so that you may live forever, or you may think that you're going to live forever? The fact is that none of these things can make us happy. The only thing that can truly make us happy is when we do what we are created to do. We were created with the sole reason to worship God. Worship is a very comprehensive term. Even thinking could be worship if you're thinking about God's greatness, if you're reflecting upon nature. So I do see science and spirituality as something that can go hand in hand. Not from the perspective that, we should have a spirituality based upon science, but from the perspective that studying the world, trying to uncover what's going on, this, if anything, it should bring us closer to God. Not the prevalent idea which we have today, which is that if you study science, or if you're into science, that you should be irreligious or should turn away from God. And once we fulfill ourselves spiritually, then we will be a lot more happier. You're not going to have the sort of issues that we have today in the world where people are continuously jealous. and they're envious of other people, and they're not content because they look at somebody else and say, why don't I have that? And Islam's message is so powerful. It's that you have what you have in this life because that's what God has given you. And every human being, God says in the Quran, they will be tested with good and with evil. So it's not just the case that when you look at people online and you're like, oh my God, they have such a fantastic life. No, everybody will go through good and evil. And the fantastic thing about Islam is that good and evil is still good for the believer, because when you go through something good, you should be grateful. And gratitude is such a powerful emotion to make you just content, because you think, okay, this person may have something more than me, but fundamentally, I have things which other people don't have. And Islam teaches you, don't look at people who have more than you in the material world. Look at people who have less than you in the material world. Only look up to those people who have more than you in the spiritual realm. As in, you can see these people are conscious of God, they're mindful of God. You should look up to them. Now that's in regards to when good. In regards to something bad, when you go through something bad in Islam, you go through trials, difficulties, you discover you have cancer or a loved one is dying. Patience is what the believer is told to do. Be patient. And in that patience, God will help you. Because some people, they turn away from God when they go through a trial. But the thing is, look, if you turn away from God, if you have a trial, the trial is still there, the difficulty is still there. It's just 1,000,000 times more difficult because you have to face it without God. You have to face it without spirituality. And you will go through this up and down throughout life of good and evil, and eventually you will die. And when we think about death, we think about death as something horrible, scary. We don't want to die. We want to live forever. People are, there's this whole craze about, getting rid of death. And I went to a conference a few years ago where they were having all these sort of discussions about consciousness and living for a lot longer. And Craig Venter was actually funding these sort of projects. He's a well-known geneticist and an entrepreneur. And if somebody asks, well, isn't it that these people who get rich and now they want to live forever, and other people are like, well, what if there's too many old people? And one guy was talking about, rather than saving the body, right? What about uploading consciousness on Google Drive? Forget that. Look, we're going to die. We're all going to die. Let's just accept that. But if we live our life in the right way, death is not something that should be feared. Death in Islam, according to the Prophet, peace be upon him, death is a gift to the believer. Because a believer has paradise to look forward to. A believer is going to meet the one who created them. And the one who created them loves them more than their own mothers loved them. Of course, for the disbeliever, the one who rejects God, death is not a gift. Death is something that should be feared, and we should continuously try and live forever and get Botox and look young and do all these types of things. But for the believer, they are content. They are happy. And as Abraham, the prophet of God, taught us, we should be content with everything that happens to us, and we should always understand that everything we do in our life, our living, our dying, our sacrifice, our prayer, everything should be for God alone. Everything good I have said is from God. Every mistake is my own. Thank you for listening.